Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, guys, you know, this is my opportunity to welcome our guests. And I have been saying this from day one, and I'll continue to say it until I leave this beautiful planet of ours, especially when they're coming. I know the guest is coming with a couple of things that I deem very expensive. That is their time. What a precious gift, what a precious commodity that has been offered to every mankind on this planet. How we utilize that precious gift will tell us a lot about you, because if you understand the value of time, you start treating it different, you start living different, you start communicating different, thinking, behaving, all that stuff, as they say. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful created. It has created the individual that is before us, and Pete has gone through some stuff in his life, and we want access to those things that his journey has deposited in him. Those things, we have wonderful names for them. We call that wisdom, knowledge, insights, all of these different things. We want access. Why? Because we want to become better human spirits while we're here on this planet. I want to thank you so much, Peter, for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thanks for having me, Ken. I really am grateful for the opportunity to speak with you.
It is an honor, sir. And as I mentioned in the onset, my favorite question, I really love this question. And I posed it for you to be the opportunity to crystallize your assignment. I tell people we didn't come on this planet to work and have a job. We came for our assignment. And that assignment always has to do with serving others. And I say this so that the audience can step out of their life from time to time and realize that it's not all about you. It's all about us. As you get things that learn about you, there's a responsibility for you to step beyond that. How do you serve mankind?
I like to see myself as someone who helps people be more aware, because I believe awareness allows change. And a lot of us are looking for change, and it's not until we become aware of the things that are driving us and motivating us that we can actually make those changes. A real big part of my work is helping people create more moments of happiness in their life, because I believe that happy people are better citizens, better partners, better neighbors, better parents. And so when people can find more authentic happiness through that raised awareness, I think that's what kind of brings it all together.
Yeah, I think, as you say, the awareness piece, I think that is, to me, is the beginning of the journey. One has to be aware of something, and whatever it is, I don't want this anymore. I deserve whatever that is. When one becomes aware of that deficiency or whatever that need is, it is beginning, because what one begins to do after that is hunt for knowledge. And so one of the customs that we have here at Threads of Enlightenment is to go back, because we want to know what happened to you. How did you get to where you are, dealing with books and happiness and all those type things? It didn't one day you pop up and you woke up and you were this happy creature walking around educating all the others. You had to go through some stuff, and as a result, you had to gain these things. One of the very first spaces that we visit as human beings while we're here on this planet is the family unit. We reside where these two human spirits are there, mom and dad. They are traumatized, however, and whatever trauma they went through in their life, but they are now going to put together whatever they've learned separately together and begin to deposit that information into you. What was your family unit like?
Well, I was born in Germany, but my stepfather, who I grew up with since the time I was very little, was in the Canadian military, and my mom's German, so we started out in Germany, and then when I was 4, we moved to Canada, and I grew up in Canada. But I grew up not knowing that the man I thought was my father was actually my stepfather, and so there was a lot of hidden stuff, secrets, a lot of these being treated differently than my brother, even though, my parents claimed we always treated you equally. There were all these subtle differences that on a conscious level I wasn't really aware of, but on an unconscious level, it really ate away at me over years so that I ended up in my 30s being really depressed. In fact, once I discovered what depression was and went into therapy, I realized, or we went back and recognized the first signs of depression were already when I was 7 years old, in grade 2. So I had a family unit that really had parents that provided me everything, all my physical needs, supported me in a lot of areas, but I think weren't on an emotional level. I struggled a lot because I was very different from them. So it made me fairly introverted and not feeling like I belonged and so on. And so my life became this search for belonging and, the sense of finding people who would love me for who I am and accept me and make me feel like part of the unit. That's, I think, when I look back, that's kind of a good starting point.
Yeah, I believe the genesis of our stories, Peter, is always back there. It's
Mm-hmm.
subconscious, consciously, however it comes, and what it does, it will cause you and I to make decisions, as we spoke earlier about our perspective. It begins to form things within us, and subconsciously, consciously, we are not aware of it in many cases, but it's there, and it begins to program us to behave and think certain ways. And then it manifests. And then as we get older, we realize there is something here that I need to deal with. And that's the journey as we begin. It says, you become aware that there is something here that I need to deal with. When you were growing up, as you mentioned, within that family unit, and you're heading towards college, what was the conversation with? Because I'm always curious as to how did we head into that direction. But first, let's back up a little. Let's go into high school, because those subconscious and unconscious perspective causes us to relate to people. We start developing relationship skills and habits and stuff like that. And even though those things are subconscious or unsubconscious, they produce fruit. What was
Mm-hmm.
your relationship like outside of family, with friends and stuff like that?
Well, I had very low self-esteem in high school. So I kind of attracted or was drawn to the people who equally had low self-esteem. Even though I, for whatever reason, distanced myself from any kind of drug abuse, I was surrounded by a lot of drugs and negative behavior, crime, all kinds of things that probably my parents weren't even aware of. Because I felt a sense of belonging in that group, I hung out with those people, even though I didn't necessarily partake in a lot of the activities. But I had a very low self esteem, and I really struggled to believe in my own potential and to recognize my own potential. And I think that really stood in my way. I basically, my strategy, and as you have these beliefs and then they develop certain strategies. And my strategy was, well, for one, I don't want to be, and this is upon reflection. This wasn't something I recognized at the time. Obviously, I don't need to
Yeah,
explain to
yeah,
you. These aren't conscious strategies, but I can't be better than my father or my brother. Otherwise, I will it will create conflict or it will cause me to be pushed away. And so for whatever reason, that was my perspective. And so when it came to my grades, I did enough to get through, to get by. I didn't excel at anything. And also to avoid failure, I just avoided trying. So, and plus I had a very fixed mindset that I needed to have a particular talent, and I was searching for this talent that I would one day discover,
yeah.
and then I would be able to do it. The minute I tried it, I would be, whether it's, being a musician or being some kind of, whatever it is in life. And so that really, if there was something that I tried that I wasn't instantly good at, I would just move on to the next thing. And so all these kind of erroneous beliefs led to really not self-destructive, but self-inhibiting kind of strategies that really caused me to underperform in a lot of areas and caused me to miss out on a lot of joy and fun that you could have in that part of your youth. And instead, I focused on distracting myself from those feelings and emotions that were there, because below the surface there was a truth that I was looking for, that I discovered when I was in my 30s, when I came back to Germany, and I've found out the truth about my family history and so on. So it's interesting. We don't know things consciously, but on an unconscious level, we have this. We're drawn to something. There's this truth sitting there waiting to be discovered.
Yeah, I think that's who we are. I think the illusion of the flesh or the body, most people live in that illusion, but that the reality is inside that inner subconscious individual that religious folks will say that's the soul. Psychologists will call that individual the I can't even think right now, Peter, subconscious man, and that's basically how they explain each feel or each mindset. But that's who we are. That's the this is our house, and when we most society focus on the material things of the house, but then that truth of something that needs to be done and said is sitting back there, just waiting for the opportune time to begin to start moving forward to get you to the place where you're going to find out what's going on here. One of the things is the reason why I asked that is as far when we start thinking of things and reacting, one of the very first things that we do, Peter, is we develop, as you said, our strategy, and that strategy is just to cope, just to handle it, just to maintain. And we do our best to make sure that we stay below the radar and function, if you will. And then, as I said, it'll take us towards that place where we have to really begin to become seekers to understand what's going on. So when you were at that young man thinking of heading into college, which field of study did you pick and why did you pick that?
Well, I was heavily influenced by my environment at a fairly young age. I remember a friend whose father was keen to get me into his sales force. This was at 15, 16 years old. He just thought I was a natural born salesman. And so you don't study sales. So I went into marketing,
Yeah,
and that was kind of, I didn't know what else I wanted to do. If I had followed my passions, I was in high school. I was good at English and history, and so I had no desire to be a school teacher, or I didn't really wasn't drawn to the academic path, but I just wanted to be very pragmatic, get it out of the way, and move on to having a work life. So yeah, so that's basically what I did, and it was a very kind of pragmatic thing rather than something that I was passionate about.
yeah. And once you got there, because I deal in marketing as well, and you learn a lot being in that space. You have to learn so much because people think marketing is easy and so forth. Sales, I'm not too passionate about that, but I love marketing. I love the strategizing of things and putting in place how we're going to do what we do. When you got there, and this gentleman said he saw that when you at 15 that you can become pretty proficient as a sales individual. When you got into that field of marketing, what did you begin to learn about you as far as an individual in dealing with the precepts and the concepts of marketing, the mindset of it, and all of those different things?
Well, I recognized, for one, that that we are all influenced, if not manipulated, by our environment and the inputs and so on. And I actually, I saw a lot of things from a very negative light at that age, and
Yeah,
so I didn't really see it. I wasn't really drawn to it, but I thought I could use it for my own benefit. Again, it was a phase of my life where I was looking for what can I get, how can I attain things. But I would say that I was still so stuck in this mindset of it's a tough world, it's a difficult world, and I've just got to do what it takes to get ahead. And so I don't think that I took a lot of really positive things out of it, other than, okay, now I know how I could build my own business. Now I know how I could, I did learn to use the English skills and the writing skills that I was passionate about. And so it gave me the ability to use some of my, or at least to start to glimpse some of my potential, because I love to write. Obviously, I still do to this day. Only I wasn't using it to serve others. I wasn't using it to add any value. I was looking to use it to manipulate or to get what I needed out of it. So that I didn't realize that until much later, but it was it was in conflict with a lot of my values. And so it's the same reason I really rejected in the beginning getting into sales, because I saw a salesperson as you have the typical kind of used car salesman that you might have in your mind. That was just not what I wanted to be. Although I eventually did end up getting into sales and was successful at it. And I think there are authentic and honest ways to do it. But I think I took the view that uh, these forces were out there when it relates to marketing, and people will use them to manipulate you or to take advantage. And so I need to also be aware of them and control them and so on. So as I think you get a sense that I had a very negative perspective, even though there are many very positive things you can take out of it.
Yeah, people don't know how powerful marketing can be, but we can see it. Those who are aware of it, and even people who are aware of it, Peter, but they don't understand the behind the scenes, if you will, that what it does to the mind and how it manipulates and motivates them. We see kids today that are prone to fast food and stuff like that, and all of that is marketing, and all the different clothes, how we move about on this planet is due to all the different behind the scenes stuff of marketing that you and I know some of those programmers and how they do it.
Yeah.
But as you become more and more of it, I find myself disconnecting from a lot of things because I know, you know, I know what it's doing. So here you are. You had mentioned in the onset of our conversation that it was in your 30s that you really began to look in deep and look inwards. What
Mm-hmm.
was those events that caused you to start heading in that direction? Um, it's always a series of, and then it comes and it crescendos. I tell people life your problems are something like Bolero. It takes years of doing, and then all of a sudden there's a cymbals crashing, and you're all over the place, and you're burning out. And so, what was the incidents that began to escort you towards, beginning to look on the inward part of who you truly are?
Well, as you say, it was a series of events. My brother and I, we had built a business together in Canada, and externally, it looked like I had a pretty great life. And in a lot of aspects, I guess I did, but I was deeply unhappy, and I didn't communicate that to anyone. For one, because I felt ashamed. I had all these things going for me, and I still wasn't happy. Like, what excuse or what reason could I have not to be? And so I pushed through for a long time, but it's just like anything when someone's trying to get your attention, they may speak to you normally and get louder and louder, and eventually they'll be maybe screaming at you to get your attention. And I think that was the inner voice kind of manifested itself in that depression, because there were these things that were not being met, and these awareness that kept being suppressed. So at first I thought, listen, I could see my own deficiencies and my own issues and the distractions that I pursued. And so at first I thought hypnosis will fix me. I thought I was defective also because I was feeling so unhappy. And I thought there must be something mentally wrong with me. In fact, I was literally afraid of, even when I started going to therapy, I didn't really talk about my darkest kind of thoughts and feelings because I was afraid of being institutionalized.
Yeah,
That's how yeah, kind of twisted it was. But what happened was I went from hypnotherapy to regular therapy, and that was initiated because a public service announcement. I was listening to the radio, and they said, they listed these symptoms. If you have these, you may be suffering from depression. And I thought, wow, there's a name for what I'm going through. And
yeah,
and then someone actually who was going to see a therapist referred me, and I started going to that, and that's when I started to recognize that a lot of the things the way I was seeing the world and the way I was feeling, those weren't unnatural, or they didn't mean that I was dysfunctional, that I had some kind of defective brain. In fact, it just meant I had to address some things. And that's when I started to look back at my past and be able to work through what, for me, as an adult, I didn't think I went through any trauma as a child, but that child experienced it as trauma. And I think a
yeah,
lot of us, discount, what certain events, if we experience them as adults, we can manage them, but as a child, they're traumatic for us. So I went through that, and that started giving me some light, whereas before I was really at a point where I wasn't sure I wanted to continue with my life. And so, but along with that therapy, I also was suffering from chronic lower back pain, and I started going to yoga as a last resort. Through yoga, I discovered meditation. And then one of my therapists recommended a meditation teacher, and that gave me a whole new sense of enlightenment. And then I started going to a therapist who did regression therapy. And so it was all these kind of different steps that I was taking, but it was mainly the things that I was doing for myself. I started to see the world in a different way. I started really becoming very curious and reading a lot of personal development books, but also that practice of meditation helped me recognize that I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my beliefs, and I found separation that allowed me to be more aware and recognize that if I change the way I think and believe, I can become a different person and I can see the world in a whole new way, and that allowed me to facilitate change, but also recognize potential that I up till then was completely unrealized. So yeah, a lot of really interesting coincidences, people bringing me together with certain information, certain books. Sometimes I remember this one case where I was at a friend's house party and this book practically jumped off the shelf at me. And so it was just a period of really accelerated growth over 2 years that took me from being really depressed to the point where I couldn't leave my apartment to really looking at, where do I want to take my life? What are all the opportunities? And that led me to a point where I decided, that family business, because my brother and I had the business, but our parents were involved, they would help us and so on. And I realized I needed to step away from that to really discover who I am and who I want to be rather than who I am in your parents will always see you as that child that they raised, and sometimes you will continue to play that role if they in that situation. So that had me make that step from leaving this business my brother and I had built, which we eventually sold, completely leaving my whole life in Vancouver, backpacking through Asia, and then eventually coming to Europe and discovering my roots and discovering the truth about my history. So it was quite a revelation and quite a journey. And I'm so grateful for all the challenges that I faced along the way, because it's put me in a position now where I can teach others to overcome those kind of challenges. And I don't see myself as much of a teacher, but I can accompany them on that journey. That's the way I see my role as a coach.
Yeah, I think I love the terminology of more of a guide, one that is able to guide you through certain processes that you're at, because that individual recognizes where you're located. And I told them this: usually they'll locate you by the questions they'll ask, and you will one day say, when they ask you a question, "Oh, I never thought about that," because no, you're busy or you're doing something else. But they have located you, and they know where you are because they have been there. And because they've been there, they know how to escort you out of it much faster. One of the things that I've come to believe, Peter, is that when we make a decision, we being, meaning that individual that is inward, the subconscious individual, when he makes a decision, because I believe we are all energetic in energy to a degree, that when we release it, he actually believes everything that he just said, regardless of what it looks like. And I believe he pulls, because energy speaks to energy, and he begins to pull, just like energy speaks to energy when you were bringing in all of those folks that were depressed and stuff like that when you were younger. But now you are aware of the need of being aware. And when he becomes aware, I think he pulls in, and the synchronicity begins to happen as we begin. And you said that book will jump off. Yeah, because he knows you need that book, and he will put you in that situation, that place, that party where that book has been sitting there for months. Nobody knows anything about that book. And then you show up. Why? Because that book was for you, not for anyone around there. They were passing all over the place. But that inward man knew that there was something there. And so I believe that he pulls us to the different location that we need to get done and bring in people to our space. Just like you, man, it was meditation. These are tools we talk about. Peter mentioned different tools that he used through individuals to bring into his space. Meditation saved my life And I've said that 100 times, and I'll say it again. Meditation, I tell people we all meditate. People tell me, oh, I can't meditate. I'm like, you are meditating. Trust me. You're meditating on all the bad things. You're thinking about it all the time, but you're not claiming that it's meditation. You're not really realize that it is meditation because you are meditating on it. Meditating is you're focusing on it. You may be working and you're thinking about that bill. You're thinking about the fact that I am less than, and you're meditating on it. But when you become a purposeful meditator, things begin to change. Challenges begin to happen. Meaning when you become one that is going to create what you want versus one that is just allowing it to happen. And when you make that switch, when you become aware and you go, wait a minute, I can change this. That's when you begin to create and that journey begins to unfold. And it is a wild ride. And I invite any one of you guys to begin that wild ride. None of us can say it's going to be like this. It's going to be fun, but it's going to be hard. And remember that when it gets hard, you haven't failed. It's just processes you're moving through. Just hang in there. Be kind to yourself. Always remember that. Be kind to yourself and be very mindful of what you're saying. Why? I always tell people because you're listening. So be very careful of what you're saying. And so here you are, Peter, you got a chance to travel, and we talked about what traveling does, the mindset that it starts to open one to talk to us about that, because I think it's very important. Any one of you that is out there listening and you have an opportunity to travel and get out of your culture that you're used to, go to Asia, go to different culture and drink, just drink, and you'll have a really good time. Talk to us about some of those experiences that as you began to navigate from quote unquote your comfort zone and began to expand your horizon in your life.
Yeah, I found that, well, first of all, the beauty of the diversity of the world, the
Yeah.
people experiencing life in so many different ways and just hearing different viewpoints, whether I disagreed with them or agreed with them, it didn't matter. It just recognizing the ability to look at things from so many different perspectives. But I think the most profound thing was when I came across a lot of people, you go to countries that are less well off than the Western countries we come from, and you see people living, and when you compare them to people back home, they have very little based materially, and yet I experienced and I witnessed people far happier than people I knew who I consider wealthy, and it really made me think that, well, there's clearly something to happiness that people in the material world of marketing and consumption and so on are missing, because these people are able, under difficult circumstances, are able to still find happiness. And I think part of what explained that to me is when I read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and there was a scene where he talks about being in this concentration camp, but there was this ray of warm sunlight on this very cold day that touched it, and he was able in that moment to just appreciate it and find a brief moment of happiness despite horrific conditions. And I think, not all the people I met on my travels were suffering necessarily, but they certainly didn't live in the level of comfort that a lot of people think they need in order to be happy. And I think that was the biggest revelation for me, that recognizing those moments of happiness come from a lot more than just those peak experiences or those ultimate comfort and the beach vacation or what have you. I think recognizing you can find happiness in so many different types of moments and situations was truly a revelation for me.
Yeah, it's one of the things that is afforded to you as you step out. You will see, just as Peter said, you'll see it, and it's clear as day, and it will impact you profoundly as to what we have been told from where we live and what is important. And you can sit down with someone that in our world, we will say that they're poor, but when you have that conversation, you find out how rich they truly are and how poor you are. And it makes you humble. It really does. And I have been humbled many times Peter, from having those conversations, because you learn how to strip away your ego, your expectations, and all the the program that we have received for all of our life in Western civilization as to what is important versus what is really important. And when you step outside, that's when you begin to get a taste of it. So we invite you, both Peter and I will invite you to doing something like that. I'm telling you, it's really, really going to change your life. And here you are, Peter, you're there, you're getting a chance to experience some of that. And you said you gravitated back into your childhood place because you're still seeking, there's still this thing in you that is unrest, and you wanted to reconnect, and you went back to the family, if you will. Talk to us when you got there, and that revelation now begins to hit you that, wait a minute, the individual that I thought was dad was not dad, and I have roots somewhere else. How did that information impact you? Did it validate what you felt inside all these years? What did it do to you when you got there and you began to get all that data?
Well, it's interesting because there were a lot of intuitively, I remember the day that I was going to go and get my birth certificate. And I said to someone, I think I'm going to find out something very profound about myself. So there was intuitively, I knew there was something up, and for based on no factual information. But I went in and I got my birth certificate, and I said, was I born with this name? Because on paper there was nothing stood out. And then the lady said to me, "What do you mean? Don't you know you're adopted?" And I said, "What?" And then it turned out that my mom's my biological mother, and then I have a stepfather. But and I grew up thinking, from my heritage, that I was half Scottish, half German, and it turned out I was half British, half German. But they in Germany they have this thing where you have a family book, and with every generation there's new entries into it. And so they actually printed out this page, and it had all the details of my biological father and so on. So the first thing was, it was mixed emotions. There was, all these things I've been feeling all these years. Now I understand. Now it's all making sense to me. But on the other side, there was this real sense of, wow, I've been lied to my whole life. Because as a kid, I was always scolded for being dishonest, and honesty was the most important thing. And yet I'd been lied to my whole life. And so there were these real conflicting feelings. And so there was still a lot to process there. And I actually, I had my stepfather was the only father I'd ever known. So I didn't really have a desire to go pursue finding my biological father. But eventually I had some friends who each of them had met their half brother. So I thought, wow, I wonder if I have other siblings out there. And that was the motivation to find my biological father, who I eventually met. And then he unfortunately passed away a year after I met him. But just meeting and just sort of closing the circle, I guess, kind of completing the mystery, if you will, of my past was really very gratifying. And then discovering I did have actual siblings was great, and to actually to meet them. So my family expanded through the experience, but so did my awareness of who I am.
And as you became more aware of who you are and that aspect of realizing that you were lied to, how did you handle that relationship with the other family, if you will, that had brought you up? How did you begin to interact with mom and dad that you grew up with this additional information? How did you handle that?
Well, I didn't want to have a lot of blame. I'd been through the period of development and recognized that, forgiveness and not hanging on to the past was really important. I was already had the tools to, not to try and do it in a very loving way. So I had, well, first of all, my stepfather wasn't very happy with me leaving the business behind.
Yeah.
And so he kind of, I guess I can only assume because he hasn't spoken to me since, but basically I assume he took a position that I kind of abandoned my brother. I have a very close relationship with my brother, so it was never that. And We still have a great relationship to this day, but I think there was some of that. But my mom, I wrote her a letter saying, "Look, here, I've always been better in written language than necessarily in communicating verbally." And so I put my thoughts down into a letter and sent it to her. And I said, "Look, you don't have to explain this to me, but if you would like to, I'm very open to having a conversation." And when I saw her again, she said, "Thanks for being so understanding." And that was it. So we didn't see any. That is a reflection of the way my family is with the emotional stuff. All the deeper stuff does not get addressed. It gets swept under the rug. And I was able to break free of all that and speak openly. And my mom would cringe if she knew I was publicly talking about the story. But for me, it's I don't want my life to be a secret. I don't want my it's all part of this rich journey that I've been on. And so I think we all have our own kind of quirky story to tell about our past. And I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of. And I think doing so really is very liberating. And so I think that whole recognizing the truth and starting to reflect on, this is why things were the way they were. And my mom was very young when she had me. And so just being able to put all those pieces together and having empathy for the journey that they were on, and why things might have turned out the way they did. I think that finding forgiveness where it was needed, finding the ability to let go, and release the past, and allow myself to move on. And most importantly, allowing myself to forgive myself, to let go of the criticism that I had built up, the blame that I had put on myself, all the negative self-talk and so on. And so when all the pieces came together, it made a lot more sense and it allowed me to be compassionate to others and to myself.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier, Peter, is be very mindful and very careful what you say, because you are listening. And we have a tendency, I remember in my journey where I was very critical, and we all critical to ourselves in a certain degree because of expectations that we place upon ourselves. But once we begin the journey, start dissecting that, and we learn how to be kinder to ourselves, forgiving, which is one of the most powerful things that you will ever do in your life, to you and to others. And I always tell people, it is done. Forgiveness is always and will ever, forever be done from a place of strength. It's never from a place of weakness. And so allow that thought that you're weak to do something. You're strong to go and face that individual. You're strong to face yourself, to learn to forgive yourself. That's where it begins. And then you're stepping out to those that harm you. But most of all, you harm you too. And so once you've learned how to forgive you, you'll be able to forgive the others on the outside. It just takes a little time, but that's okay. And as I said, just be kind, man. Just learn to be kind, patient with yourself. You're never going to make it happen in one day. This thing takes years. I used this one time, Peter, to show how when it comes time, because I grew up in the church, and I remember reading when it tells us that the heaven and the earth, this creator came and he created heaven and the earth in 7 days. I remember reading this other part of the book. It says that a day to the Lord is like 1,000 years to mankind. So let's relate that to us, how we look at dogs, dog years and all this type of stuff. And so in that type of language. So when I put that in interface, it took him, in my time, in your time, 7,000 years. And so it took him some time. And so when you are creating, and I tell people, when you're creating your life, and when we are reading from, again, when I'm coming from a Christian thing, when the creator took 7 days, you as a creator here is going to take you some time, because everyone wants to make it happen right away, Peter, and that's not the case. It takes time to undo. It takes time to reprogram. It takes time to accept, forgive, all of these different things. So be patient with yourself and be kind. It's going to take time, but always keep moving. Peter and I talk about happiness, and I'm going to ask him some questions on that, because he mentioned about it and he wrote a book, Rethinking Happiness. And I want to talk to him as to how did that come about, because here you are dealing with all those profound emotions with the two parents and so forth, and the uncovering of family, of self-discovery as well, and learning about who you are and getting exposed to what happiness looks like and all of these different things from different cultures. How did you begin to put this thing together in a format by which now it will give you the opportunity to truly be a servant to others that are in similar situations like you? How did that came about?
There were multiple factors that contributed. Like, as I said, I really love to write. I used to write little notes to myself, note to self, kind of like a Marcus Aurelius, the way he wrote his sort of his memoirs or his meditations in his book, but obviously not to the profound level of him. But I turned that into a blog, so I would write a regular blog with exactly those kind of thoughts, reflecting. It was a note to self because they were thoughts I was having that I was using to reflect and become more aware, and I was sharing them with others. So that was one piece of it. But I also realized that from my travels and from everything I'd seen and experienced in the world, and then coming back to Europe and seeing that contrast, I realized that beliefs about happiness or the way people strive for happiness, there's a mistake in the thinking. There's some erroneous thinking in there, and then I put that together with the idea, well, when I reflect on where I've come from, the fact that I have been able to come from being so unhappy to living a very joyful life, there must be some bits of wisdom that I can pass on that can help there too. So it was all those things that came together that made me think, okay, if I can put this into some kind of concise format, for one, I can better articulate my ideas and I can clarify them better for myself, but also I can pass that knowledge on to others. And both are meant to sort of be of service to others, because if I can articulate better, people will understand it hopefully better and become more aware. But also putting it in a format of a book, then people don't even need me. They can have it in a written format. So yeah, those were all those influences that went into it. And for me, I realized the fundamental biggest thing that changed my life was understanding that by changing my beliefs and my habitual ways of thinking, I could drastically change my life. And so in the book, I first of all help people define what happiness means to them, because no one can answer that question for you. I think that's an important thing, because people look for these external sort of indicators or these checklists of things to do in order to get to happiness, and that, like, as if it were some destination. So I wanted to really dispel that. And then from there, help people create a personal philosophy, sort of a set of beliefs that would guide them a successful, happy life. And I approach it from a coaching perspective. So I give, in each chapter, I give people different perspectives on happiness in different areas of your life. And at the end of every chapter, I ask certain questions so that people can reflect and discover their own answers. It's not me saying, here's the way you do it and here's what you should believe. It's me going, here are the possibilities. Now think deeply about this and find the truth for yourself.
And that is the purpose of that guide, or the teacher, the sage, the coach, however, whatever terminology we want to utilize. That is their position, because you want that individual to learn how to do it on their own, see it as you guide them there, and they will change the world, man. And you guys, hey, you've been listening to us for a while, and one of the reasons why I bring folks on like Peter, because they've been through, and I want you guys to become familiar with them, because you need to buy his book. If you're thinking you're not happy, rethinking happiness and your belief, because your beliefs will guide you to all those different emotional pieces as well. And you have to learn how to see it, how to utilize it, how it becomes a part of it, and all that stuff. And again, early on, he had talked about meditation. Meditation, what it did to me, what it gave me the opportunity was to pick the thoughts that I wanted to bear fruit in my life. I became a designer versus I realized that my thoughts are fluid, but your thoughts, everything starts there. And the thoughts are all fluid. But when you pick one and you learn to accept it and become all of these different, it ends up to be your belief. That thought will become your belief. So you have to learn which one you want to pick and why, the results that it will bring to you. And someone like Peter can guide you through that. He's been there. He knows some of those nuances that you're not aware of because of life. You're busy, you have kids, you're busy with work, and you're new in this journey. But there are some little nuances that one can pick up as they have gone through their journey and walk through the other side, and are now in the service arena, if you will. We're never, ever, ever, ever going to stop growing. Peter's still going through his journey. I know he is. He's finding out more stuff about him than he never even thought was there. Stuff that he thought he had dealt with years ago, popping up, and you're like, where? And so there's always that fine tuning, but there's nuances that we learn, and he can assist you in recognizing a few things to escort you out of your situation much faster. And the journey is forever. You will never, ever arrive, and you wouldn't want to arrive either because you'd be bored out of your mind. So, but the journey is to help you begin to make choices, change your belief, change your attitude, and change your life. Is there anything, Peter, I ask people this question from time to time because I know we've had this recent election, and I'm talking to a lot of people that are all over the place, and their happiness is in question. And you are aware of the type of things that we grab onto and claiming to be happy. Those folks that are out there, talk to them, bring them some insight as to how to manage themselves as far as their emotions and being happy and all of these different things right here, because it is an important time for them. Many are broken. How would you speak to them as to their expectation, and yet now they have to deal with self and how to go about doing that?
Sure. I think, as I said, the thing that's profoundly changed my life was recognizing that I could change my beliefs and my thinking habits. And I think a lot of people are very invested in a certain way of thinking and believing. It's become part of their identity. And I think the question to ask is, do the beliefs that I have, do they serve me? I even look at it in a very pragmatic way. Does this belief benefit me rather than necessarily, because a lot of our beliefs, we cannot necessarily prove if they're true or not. A lot of times our beliefs, we've just adopted them. We believe they're true. A lot of they wouldn't just be a belief if we could factually prove them. And so basing your beliefs based on their utility and recognizing that they're useful, and do they support my happiness and my success in life, or do they stand in the way? Because a lot of times we believe things because we do, and they actually stand in our way. And so when we start to reflect and recognize that the beliefs that are in our way, we can start to adjust and walk a new path. And I think that's such a really important thing. We are often, I like what you said about in this moment, what can we do? Because we're often captured by our past. I'm so grateful for the challenges that I've had because they've made me who I am, and I'm happy with who I am now. But a lot of times our beliefs from the past keep us anchored there and don't allow us to move forward from this point where we're at. So check your assumptions and ask yourself whether they're supporting you and helping you. So if your beliefs about the way to see the world, the way to see politics or whatever it is that's occupying your mind at the moment, ask yourself if this way of thinking and this way of believing is serving me. If it's not serving you, you won't be able to serve other people in a positive way. And I think that's the real obstacle for most of us is the belief that we're stuck in that's holding us back from our own healing, our own forgiveness, our own ability to create change in our lives.
And thank you so much for that. And again, I want to thank you for coming to Threads of Enlightenment and spending your precious time with us and allowing us the space, the vantage point of enjoying your journey and how it changed you and made you who you are today. And so we want to thank you again and honor you for coming and sharing with us. We do deeply appreciate it. Thank you again for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
I want to thank you for the invitation, and I'm so grateful for the conversation we've had. It's been enlightening for me, and I hope the conversation has been added value for others.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.